In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to upcycle one of these. My name is Charlotte Allen and you have reached my channel, The Felting Alchemist. So today we're going to be turning this bird cage into a beautiful Dickensian, Gothic looking Christmas table centerpiece to go on your Christmas table at Christmas and really add some magic and whimsy and wonder to your festive decorations. Now I had this idea of this kind of very Miss Havisham-esque centerpiece that was very opulent with lots of beautiful flowers and pearls with some kind of needle felted creature in the middle to really add a sense of mysticism to the piece. So I took this and I came up with this, and this is what we're going to be making today. So I've sprayed it all in this beautiful vintage gold paint. We've got our mouse in the middle who's kind of swinging in the center with his kind of special swing that I've made for him. Then we've got all of the beautiful foliage, the lights, the pearls. It really is incredibly festive. So I wanted to make this piece so it could be out all year round rather than just being tied to Christmas. But I really do think there is a lovely, beautiful, magical element to this that really does fit in well with the Christmas season. So let me show you how I made it. These are the two bird cages we're going to be upcycling. Now originally I was thinking of spraying them black to give them that really lovely Gothic, Victorian, Dickensian look. And then I realised that I've run out of black spray paint. So I'm going to go with gold instead. And actually I think gold's more of a festive colour anyway. So I'm going to prime them and then I'm going to spray them gold to make them look really glitzy and festive for the Christmas season. And then we're going to be adding some beautiful floral decorations. We're going to be adding pearls, and obviously we're going to be making some beautiful felted creatures to go inside the cages as well. And then we're going to be adding some beautiful festive lights all around them as well to make them all sparkly and beautiful. So they'll make a gorgeous Christmas centerpiece for your Christmas table, or you can give it as a gift, or you could keep it as a beautiful, soft, magical lighting piece to go into your lounge, living room, dining room, wherever you want it to go. So I've got one bird cage here and I've wiped off all the dust and given it a bit of a clean just to make sure that there's nothing on the surface that is going to interrupt the distribution of the paint and make the paint lumpy and bumpy and a bit ugly. So the very first thing you want to do before you add any colour at all is you want to put some primer on. So I've got a primer here. I'm just going to give it a good shake. Now I've coated my bird cage in the primer, I'm just going to leave it for the amount of time it says to on the can for it to set properly, and then we're going to add the gold paint, so I'll see you in a minute. So the primer that I've added to the bird cage is now set and ready, and I actually added another layer off camera to make sure it's properly prepared before we add our gold spray paint. So the next thing to do is add the gold, so I'm going to give this a good shake. And make sure that when you're spraying the spray paint, you're spraying it from the same distance away so you don't end up with any kind of dripping or anything like that if you've sprayed it too close to the bird cage. So about 30 centimetres is about right. And you'll probably want to go back in and add quite a few layers so you're building up the colour gradually rather than trying to do it all in one go. So I've added the first layer, so I'm going to let that dry for about 20 minutes and then I'm going to go back in and add a second layer. So I will see you in a minute. Whilst the paint is drying, I'm going to make my first creature to go in the first bird cage, and I'm going to make this mouse mainly because I love mice. That's kind of the sort of the front of my business is making needle felted mice. So I really think it makes sense to have a cute, whimsical mouse inside the first bird cage. Perhaps we could have him swinging inside on some kind of like swing, or maybe climbing up the bars or something like that. I don't know yet, but I'm going to make him. And then the second needle felted creature I'm going to make, I think is going to be a bear, just to tie in with that bird cage theme. And I think again it will add a lovely kind of Victoriana, whimsical feel to the bird cage. And then that way both cages appeal to different groups. You've got the people that like the kind of the cutesy mice kind of look, and then you've got the people that prefer the more traditional bird look to the bird cage. So I'm going to crack on and make my mouse, and I will see you in a moment.
Well, I'm all for Christmas, all the happy smiles.
Okay, so the mouse is finished and he's looking super cute, and I really can't wait to add him to the bird cage later on. If you want to know how to make a mouse like this, I have a tutorial up here that you can follow, and it will tell you exactly how to make a mouse that looks just like this one. So the next thing to do is get my bird cage and start putting everything together. Okay, so I've sprayed the birdcage gold now. I've put about 3 layers of gold spray paint on it, and I think it's looking a lot more gothic, a lot more kind of Victorian, Dickensian in its appearance. So the next thing to do is start putting everything together. So I've got my needle felted mouse that we made earlier on, and if you go up here, you can find a tutorial as to how I make my mice, and I'm going to attach him to kind of like a rope swing. The first thing I'm going to do to make this swing is to put some eyelets into this piece of driftwood, and I got this from Charmouth Beach a few years ago, and it's kind of been drying out nicely in the garage. So it's a lovely smooth piece of driftwood, and I think it'll work really nicely inside as part of the bird cage feature. So I put one eyelet in already, so I'm going to put the second eyelet in. So I'm just going to take one here, and they're great because you can just screw these in yourself. You don't need to, if I can try and show you on the camera, you don't need to use any kind of tools or anything like that. You just need to screw them in yourself. So I'm going to try and line this up with the one I've already put in. So I'm going to place it about here. And then all I'm going to do is just make a little, start twisting the wood so the eyelet stays in place. And then once it's in place, I'm going to twist it in and keep twisting the eyelet until it's all the way inside the wood. And because it's driftwood, it's nice and soft. So you don't have to worry about using any pliers or anything like that to get this in. You can just twist it in and it stays in really well on its own. And because we're using a needle felted mouse, there's no real weight to it, so we don't have to worry about it taking any major weights and sort of breaking or anything like that. So I've got both eyelets in here, and I've got the holes kind of facing each other because that's where we're going to put our jute string in a second. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off 2 equal pieces of jute string. So I'm just going to get some lengths here, and I'm going to start out with more than I need, I think. So probably about this much. Cut one length. And then just use this as a guide for my second piece. So again, just get a nice length there. Always cut more than you need, because if you've got too much, you can always cut the excess away later on, rather than cutting it too short and then having to cut another length to get it the right length, and then you end up wasting jute string and it's all a bit frustrating and it's a bit stressful. So cut more than you need and you won't have that problem. So I'm going to take my first piece and I'm going to feed it into my hole. Okay, and I think I'm going to have it so that it's kind of doubled over, and then I'm going to tie the excess around the top of my bird cage. So that's the first one, and I'm just going to feed the second one in. You want your piece of wood to be heavy enough so that it's got enough weight to it to pull your string down. You don't want it to be so light that the string, because it's quite thick, it doesn't really have any weight to it, so it looks a bit wobbly. You want it to have a little bit of weight to it, but not too much. So I've got my little mouse here, and I'm just going to position him. So I'm going to turn him around so I can see what he looks like. I'm going to place him about here, so he looks nice and natural, and he looks like he's actually kind of swinging on the swing. So I'm just going to take my glue, and I'm going to place some on my mouse's bottom. And I'm just using super glue here. Don't need loads, just need enough just to make sure he adheres. And about there. And I'm just going to hold him down for probably about a minute until he's nicely stuck down and he's not going anywhere. So I'll be back in a second once he's stuck. My mouse is now stuck nice and solidly to the driftwood. So the next thing I want to do is I want to incorporate his hands into the swing so he looks like he's holding onto the string. So I'm just going to lift my jute string. I'm going to place it sort of around where his hands are, glue that in place, and then bend his hand round so it looks like he's holding onto the string. So I'll be back in a second once I've done that, and then you can see exactly what I've done after. There we go, so he's now looking like this. So he's holding onto the bits of string. I've glued them in place so they're not going anywhere. So now we can add him to our bird cage. So the first thing I'm going to do is feed through the first 2 pieces of string either side of one of the bars on the bird cage. And I'm just going to tie it into a really simple knot. So probably about here. Just loosely initially, just so I can get an idea of roughly where he's going to sit. I don't want to nail my colours to the mast too quickly because it might be that it's too high or it's too low. So I'm just kind of getting a rough idea of where I want him to go with those knots. So I'm going to lift up the second piece of string, and I'm going to do the same on this side. Okay, so I've worked out roughly where I want my mouse to hang now. So I've tied kind of like a rough knot. So I'm going to properly get him into place now. So I'm going to tie another knot into my jute string, just to make it nice and solid. So so it's not going to undo. And then as you'll notice, at the moment they're not very secure because it's kind of wobbling around all over the place. So what I'm actually going to do is get a bit of super glue and then adhere the jute string to the bird cage, so these pieces of string don't move anywhere when the bird cage is actually finished. So I'm just going to secure those down. So I'm going to spin them round. Right, so I've secured the jute string down with a bit of super glue, so all I need to do now is just cut away some of this excess. So I'm just going to get my scissors and I'm just going to snip just a little bit. Somebody's tired. So I'm going to leave a little bit of the string exposed because I quite like the fact that I've got this rustic jute string hanging up my swing. So I'm going to leave a little bit out like this. And then the next thing to do, which is the really exciting bit, is we're going to start adding the foliage, we're going to start adding the lights and all the pearls to this and really bring it to life and make it a beautiful centerpiece / light. Hello. I thought about making my own foliage for the bird cage out of felt and making felt flowers and things like that, but that would obviously be very time consuming and I want to sell this eventually and I need to make it financially worthwhile. And then I went to the range and I found all these kind of faux flowers and pearls and they were really, really inexpensive. And if you're a crafter in the UK, you'll know the range well. And you don't know what you're going to buy the range when you go to the range. The range tells you what you're going to buy, and that is exactly what happened to me. So I won't tell you how much I spent at the range because I don't want to disclose it to anybody that I know. But let's just say it was a reasonable amount, but it was a bargain, okay? It was definitely a bargain. So I bought a selection of beautiful flowers, beautiful roses. So I've got this lovely foliage here, which is kind of like sort of like a pinky eucalyptus that I bought. I've also got these lovely roses as well, which are really pretty, like a dusky pink colour. And I've got these pearls as well, which are great because they're all bendy. And it's really important that when you're buying your foliage to do this centerpiece or light, that everything's bendable. You don't want it to be rigid because then you're not going to be able to bend it around all of the bars and things like that. So make sure that you've got something bendy. So I've got some flower cutters here, quite substantial, but I think they need to be substantial because I'm going to be cutting through quite a lot of wire, and I'm going to cut my foliage to size and then feed it through. And it's just about kind of going with your own eye here. Don't feel like you have to stick to what I'm doing. So I'm going to start off using the eucalyptus first, and that's kind of like my filler. So I'm going to start taking off some pieces of that. Oh, it's huge. So this is actually one piece, and I think it's kind of meant to hang down like this in a house, but I'm going to cut it up. So, which might be sacrilege to some people, but I'm hoping it will work out, otherwise it's a very expensive mistake. So I'm going to take some pieces off. I think I'm going to go here. I'll just get my cutters. So go careful with these. As you know, I'm renowned for injuring myself during these crafting sessions, so don't do as Charlotte, don't be like me. So I'm just going to cut this one. I've got my pieces of eucalyptus that were cut and I definitely didn't almost injure myself. But we're going to feed these through the wires. So I'm just going to have a look at where we can feed these through. So I'm going to place these towards the bottom of our bird cage. Feed the various flowers through. I'll spin it so you can see. And just take your time with this and just use your eye, and you want to try and make it so that you get it evenly distributed, but you also want to get different heights as well. You don't want it to all be the same height, so you want to get that variation in heights and coverage. And it's great because they're not real, because they're fake. They're really durable to a degree that they haven't experienced me yet, but you can be quite rough with them and they don't break. Whereas if you were using actual flowers, you'd have to be a lot more delicate. But these are great because they're bendy as well. You can kind of really mess around with their positioning. So I'm just going to bring this one through here. So we've got our first piece of foliage added. So I'm going to add all the other pieces of foliage and I'll come back to you when they've all been put into the base of the bird cage. Right, so I've added all of the foliage to my bird cage now, and I've really built it up around the back area and the sides, as you can see here. So I've got more around the back and around the sides, but I've left this front bit here relatively free and exposed because we want to be able to see the mouse swinging on his swing, and if you put too much foliage in, it's going to get covered up. So make sure that you don't add too much around the front, and also try not to add too much around the sides as well, because what you'll find is, depending on how long your piece of wood is, it's going to hit that foliage and then you're going to lose the movement. So make sure that when you're adding this, you don't go too heavy around the sides and focus kind of predominantly around the back. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add some roses in now, and we're going to feed those in and just put them in sort of sparingly around the cage just to give it a lovely touch of glamour and magic. So I'm going to get my roses, and again, these are lovely and bendy so they can be positioned any way I want them to be. So I'm going to feed them all the way around my bird cage. So I'm going to take my croppers again, and I'm just going to give them a bit of a cut because this is far too long at the moment. So now I've got my roses cut to size, I'm going to add them to my bird cage. So again, we want to keep this part free, so we want to focus more around the sides. So I'm going to poke this one in through here, and then I'm going to feed it around the wire so it stays nicely in place. But you want to make sure that the ends feed into the cage, and then try and secure them so they're down underneath the foliage, so you don't have any kind of ends exposed, any ugly bits exposed. So the foliage is really nice for hiding any ugly ends. So I'm just going to take my next one, and again I'm just going to feed it through the bars of the cage like so. So I'm feeding it round and then kind of twisting it round using the wire to get it secured into place, and then bringing that last piece of wire down and then bending it round into position. So you should eventually have something that looks like this, and you could add more roses if you wanted to, you could add more foliage coming out the top, but just be really aware that you don't want to cover up whatever it is hanging in the middle, so just be cautious of that. So the next thing that I'm going to add is some pearls, just to give it that kind of Victorian opulence. So I'm going to take my stick of pearls that I've got, and again I'm going to cut these to size with my croppers. I've got my pearls cut, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did earlier with the foliage and the roses. I'm just going to wrap it round until I'm happy with how everything looks. So I'll be back in a minute once I've added all of the pearls. So the pearls have been added and everything is looking, I think, really beautiful. I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. So the very last thing to add, and it's really going to add the magic and the festive wonder to this centerpiece slash light, is the lights. So I'm going to get my fairy lights. So I've put the lights in ready to go. Ta-da! So all I need to do is add the lights and make this look super magical. So the very first thing to do is unravel the lights, which is always an unenviable task. So I'm going to get all these unraveled, and then I can see exactly what lengths I need to work with in terms of distributing everything nice and evenly around the bird cage. So I need to place the power pack somewhere where it's easily accessible so people can get to it and turn it on and off without having too many problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift up my cage roof. I'm going to place my mouse just in there a second, and I'm going to pop this in the middle, and because there's so much foliage in place, it should be quite well hidden. And then I'm just going to start feeding my lights in through the gaps of the bars of the bird cage, and then in around the sides, so we get a nice even distribution of light coming through. But just be aware that as you're doing it, again, you don't want to put too many in the way of your swing. You want to try and keep that as free as possible. So bear with me a second whilst I stand up, because I need to stand to do this.
Whatever we do, we will be all right.
So our mouse swinging in a birdcage centerpiece is finished, and I am so pleased with him. I think there's such a magical feel to this piece, and I think it will look beautiful on any Christmas table and really add a sense of festive whimsy and mysticism to the day. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I really hope you try this out, because it's really, really easy and so satisfying once it's all finished. And I think it will give a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. If you did enjoy this tutorial, please like it. And if you haven't had a chance yet, please subscribe to my channel, because I'm posting on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays at the moment with loads of felting hints and tips and tutorials. So I will see you tomorrow with another another tutorial. Until then, have a wonderful day and I will see you very, very soon. Bye!
Oh, whatever we